Um, for mom only to eat organic food from the health food store, that is now proven to be protective to the baby, and several studies show that. So going to Safeway and simply buying your broccoli there isn't good enough anymore. It's full of farming chemicals and not acceptable. So any pregnant mom or pre-pregnant mom, it's organic only. Even with the higher price, even with the abuse that's done there now to us by jacking the prices up so high. If you have a farmer's market, you can talk to the farmers, and even if they don't have the organic certificate, that's not what I mean, but if they grow their stuff naturally and clean, that's probably the best we can do right now.
Wouldn't you say as a rule of thumb for indoor air quality, just try to eliminate anything you can smell, cleaning products, of course the list goes beyond that, but to start with anything that you can smell would be a good starting place.
Yeah, and keep in mind beyond that many of the most toxic goods, so things like mercury vapor, are odorless, colorless, and tasteless. Quickly, it's absolutely unacceptable that people spray inside their homes for insects. It is absolutely lethal to the unborn baby. These early exposures, absolutely lethal. Find out, what was done to your home before you buy it or rent it. Hotel rooms are horrible. People that travel a lot. So during pregnancy, women should not travel. They should not sit in an airplane. They should not move from hotel room to hotel room, which are always sprayed and have a cloud of toxic chemicals inside them. The indoor air is on average 20 times more toxic than the outdoor is on the most toxic day. So if you go to downtown Los Angeles on the most toxic smog day, the air outside is 20 times cleaner than the air that builds up inside the home. Airing out the home twice a week, opening every window, every door, putting fans that blow air through it is a good idea. So these are pretty much the 4 exposures. It really is that it's limited to that. It doesn't take an Albert Einstein to break that down, come up with this. And the solutions are pretty simple and usually cheap. The avoidance is fairly inexpensive. It is more easy to build a non-toxic home than buying a toxic home and trying to make it clean, but usually it's possible, except for the infections. Once the home is moldy, the home is always moldy. It's an illusion that we can clean up a home. We can improve it slightly and reduce the amount of exposures, but once you've been exposed to a home, in our experience, it is not possible to really clean up a home because there's so many nooks and corners that you can't change, and these bugs are survivalists just like us. They survive on anything, in anything, in any circumstance. Okay. So I think I want to leave that part here. This is the exposure part. Now let's roll over. Okay. Now the person has accumulated those things inside themselves.
Just pause one second. The electromagnetic field issues, does that not belong here, or does that belong somewhere else? Where does that?
So far we only talked about biochemistry, so
right.
There's other things in
it seems like it fits right there a little bit.
Yeah. We know that exposure to electromagnetic fields shuts down a number of enzymes in the body and a number of detox mechanisms. So I think I want to discuss that on the other side, with the molecular pumps that process the toxins that have accumulated. Even though electromagnetic fields can have their own impact, on the ATP production and on a large variety of biological processes. But I think I discussed it on the other side.
So, but at minimum, for an avoidance, you would have them sleep at least 3 feet away from any electrical devices.
Yes. Let's just put it this way. The most common electromagnetic exposures come A, from the nearby cell phone towers, and B, from the indoor wiring of stuff, and then we kind of break that up a little bit easier. So studies showed that within a mile of the cell phone tower, young children have abnormal EEGs. This is basically everybody in the inner city environment has an abnormal EEG from the cell phone microwave. This accumulates in certain homes depending on where the nearby cell phone towers are. Yeah, that's number one exposure today is the most devastating one. Number two exposure is simply from the electric wires in the home. They often create electromagnetic fields that can be devastating to the human organism, and especially to the growing nervous system of an infant or fetus in the womb. Number three exposure is from cordless phones in the home. Cordless phones have the little antenna and broadcast a signal 24 hours a day. Wherever you can walk with this phone and have reception, you know you have the field. And the field isn't just there when you have the phone call, it's always there. And this system of phones has been now in Europe replaced with another one because it's been shown to be absolutely devastating to the human biology. Most American homes have that system in place. And people wonder why they have insomnia. Now, if you have insomnia from electromagnetic fields, your child has epilepsy from electromagnetic fields, or autism, or another devastating neurological effect. And so, what we recommend is very simple. In terms of just anticipating that it's going to be the case in your home. A pregnant woman or the baby should sleep 3 feet away from the wall. That's where the wires are.
Same for these children with autism, because they're in a vulnerable state.
Any child should be 3 feet away from the wall, because it also prevents brain cancer and seizure disorders and other things, learning disabilities, behavioral problems and so forth, which are often caused by the unprotected brain and nervous system of a young child being exposed to electromagnetic fields that are hundreds of thousands of times stronger than the electric fields the body is communicating with itself. It disrupts the signals inside the body. To enhance this effect, we recommend that the electric circuitry inside the bedroom of the child is completely deadened by using the fuses, the fuse box, just switching off the fuses at night, at least for the longer sleeping period, where you can put a light in any plug in the room and you can put the light on. Everything is dead. But also on the opposing side, like on the back side of this wall here, if there's a plug that needs to be dead also. So we quickly figured that out, your moms figured that out, what is the fuse that I have to switch off. Sometimes, unfortunately, it's the same fuse that the fridge is on, and then mom has to minimize the time to like 7 hours or so. You can usually shut the fridge off for 7 hours without the ice melting in it. So mom does this just before she goes to bed. She switches the fuse off, and the moment she wakes up in the morning, she puts it back on, and then there's no problem. That's the second precaution. The third one is get rid of any cordless telephones in the house. Yeah, get a cordless phone like this one. Yeah, the only thing acceptable in a home. And then there's not much currently we can do for the cell phone towers, which is the most devastating piece of pollution that we have no control over whatsoever. And it's so far cast in stone legally that you can also not legally proceed against the cell phone companies to remove the tower they put up in front of your house and so forth. So we want to, again, it's a cumulative effect. We want to reduce the exposure as much as we can to the electric fields. And then beyond that, it's much easier to clean up a home when you have your own home, rather than living in an apartment building where all the fields overlap with each other. So rule number so-and-so would be get wealthy enough to be able to have your own home away from direct neighbors that impact with the insane behavior of your health. We've had many cases where when we investigated homes where we had one case where the cell phone company had run into some trouble because the neighbors were speaking up against wanting to have a cell phone tower installed. So in a large high apartment building, one of the older people on top of the roof had offered that they can install the cell phone tower in one of his rooms in the apartment to put the cell phone tower in there. So he would get like a couple of $100 less rent that way. And right next to his apartment was a young baby sleeping that had like 30, 40 grand mal seizures every day. You know? And in their case, we were able to sue successfully and get the cell phone installation out of the apartment, which wasn't legal to start with. And very quickly within that, the seizure stopped of the baby. So it was clearly linked to that. So we've seen some insane things, you know, also like that in Christian churches, the crucifix is often used as a wonderful installation for cell phone broadcasting antennas, because it hangs up high and it's invisible from the front, you only see it from the back. It's this sort of longish rod. It fits ideally behind the crucifix. And so you're talking combining evil, bringing evil into the church even, you know. It's,
in California, they make them look like trees.
yeah. Or they're put
Not
into,
good-looking trees,
yeah,
but
or they're
trees.
put into existing trees.
Oh.
So we've seen it all now. And so there is a growing resistance in the population based on the scattered knowledge that's out there. And that the industry is getting more and more crafty and hiding these things. We don't know where that's going. I'm not here as a politician, but I'm here just to mention it's a huge problem. Okay. Now, let's jump a little bit now to the middle of what we talked about. That is,
Have a good time. You want to do switch right now? We're going to do switch right now. How's that?
We have 6 minutes. So we're going to switch.
Switch. That's good. That seemed like that fit there, because otherwise it's going to be stuck in some, and they need to know that. I mean, that 3 feet away thing is huge. And it fits in that little area. Did you know that one, Jimmy?
because of
Yeah, you know, my first love was an oncologist, and we dated for 6 years, and a wonderful person. I met her at Tulane, and I used to have this, she's testified in some, they call her as an expert. She trained at the Mayo Clinic, and they've asked Christy to do testimonies in some of these cases dealing with cellular and brain damage. And, you know, this was years ago, but at that point there was no conclusive studies linking neurological damage to cellular towers.